Leica Summicron has become the benchmark 50mm f2 lens thanks to its superb optics. They are well known for their clean rendering, excellent sharpness and beautiful bokeh. There have been numerous iterations of this classic lens over the years, but it's the newest versions that tend to garner the most attention from Leicaphiles, who perceive them as optically superior. The black sheep of the family is the version 3, which we see here in black. It was made from 1969 until 1979, first in Germany and then later in Canada. This one happens to be an early example from 1969. The 70s was a particularly dodgy period for Leica, having nearly gone out of business. They'd already redesigned their Summicron R for the new line of SLRs, changing the optical formula from 7 elements to 6. This shortened the minimum focusing distance from 1 metre to 70 centimetres and improved the contrast, but at a cost of overall resolution. Whilst this may have kept their SLR users happy, it wasn't met with the same delight when they made the same optical improvements to their M-mount Cron. I'm almost exclusively a black and white film shooter, and must admit to have always been very happy with the results from my little black sheep version 3. That said, I thought it'd be an interesting experiment to compare my version 3 with this newer Chrome version 5 from 1997. The version 5 is one of the most well regarded of all the Summicrons, considered by most to be of extraordinary optical quality. I shot these test shots at my home on my Voigtlander Bessa R2 using Ilford Delta Pro 400 and then developed and scanned with my Pakon F135 Plus. For total transparency, I've not edited these images at all. I'll rattle through a few shots at each of the various apertures on both lenses, with a couple of crops so you can get a better idea of how they perform. Feel free to pause the video at any point should you wish to inspect the images in greater depth. To my eyes, both lenses are very similar, particularly when it comes to the way they render the out of focus areas. Overall contrast seems a much closer call than I would have thought though. I can perhaps see slightly blacker blacks on the version 3, but it's splitting hairs really. What is immediately clear is the certain nervous quality to the rendering of the V3. When looking at the crops in particular, there is quite a pronounced stippled effect that doesn't seem anywhere near as obvious on the V5. Although both lenses are sharp, this jitteriness of the version 3's rendering ends up muddying the image and taking away slightly from the detail. If you can't see what I mean, it's particularly obvious on the label of the big bottle of Camel Valley and the white walls surrounding the photo frames on the crops. I used ISO 400 film, so would expect to see some grain, yet somehow the version 5 manages to produce a much cleaner render overall. I do wonder if the nervousness would be as pronounced when using lower ISO film. Obviously, being a black and white film shooter, I cannot attest to the quality of the colour rendition or how these lenses would perform on modern digital cameras. Whilst it's impossible for me to argue against the version 5 superiority, it really is a close call. It's only when cropping in that you notice the V3's slight shortcomings. Whilst both lenses accept a standard E39 filter, the V3 does benefit from a much smaller size and weight, as well as a nifty reversible hood that can be stored backwards on the lens when not in use. But the build quality of the version 5 is far superior, the version 3 feeling a little flimsy by comparison. Summicrons are not cheap lenses, but what the V3 does have going for it is a much lower price tag. Expect to pay something like £1,000 for a decent used V3, and probably more like £1,500 for a version 5. I hope this video has been of some use to you if you're on the fence about which of these legendary lenses to buy. Both lenses are clearly excellent, so it really comes down to how much you're willing to spend. If money's no object, then plump for the most advanced APO Summicron, although these will set you back closer to £6,000 on the used market.